Somewhere in the frozen heart of Yakutia, where the air itself can kill, two women lived alone. The temperature had not risen above -90 in 6 days. The land had forgotten what warmth felt like. Inside, the fire was the only thing keeping death at arm's length. Nadia sat closest to the fire. She always did. Her bones ached in ways she'd stopped complaining about years ago. Her sister Vera sat across the room, mending a glove for the 3rd time this winter. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Outside, the wind had been building for hours. It pressed against the cabin walls like something alive. Then the sound came. Faint, almost nothing. A cry thin as thread cutting through the wind. Vera looked up from her stitching. Their eyes met. There it was again, louder now. Not the wind. Something alive, something small, something suffering. Nadia stood, slowly, the way old bones demand. "Don't," Vera whispered, not as a command, as a prayer. But Nadia was already reaching for the latch. Because some sounds you cannot unhear. The door opened, and the cold rushed in like it had been waiting. She could barely see. The wind was a white wall, but there at her feet a shape in the snow. A reindeer calf, newborn, barely breathing. Its mother was nowhere. Nadia didn't think. She knelt. In -96 degrees, she knelt in the snow and reached for it. Its body was ice. Its heartbeat, if there was one, was too faint to feel through her mittens. "Vera!" she called out, and her voice broke the silence like glass. Together, they lifted the calf. It weighed almost nothing, like carrying a bundle of frozen sticks wrapped in fur. The door shut behind them. The wind screamed outside, but inside, there was still a chance. But this story doesn't begin here. It begins months earlier, before the cry, before the storm, when the last road out froze over for the season. Every winter, the sisters were cut off. No road, no phone signal, no neighbors for 40 kilometers. They had chosen this, or rather, this life had chosen them, and they had stopped arguing with it. Nadia's husband, Dmitri, had built this cabin 46 years ago, with his hands, with promises. He died 11 winters ago. Heart gave out while clearing snow from the roof. Nadia found him in the morning, already cold. Vera's husband, Kolya, had gone 2 years before that. Cancer, the kind that doesn't wait. After the funerals, Vera moved in with Nadia. 2 widows in one cabin, 2 silences that understood each other. Their days followed a rhythm older than language. Wake before light, feed the stove, melt snow for water. Every morning the first task was the same. The stove had to be brought back to life, or they wouldn't be. Then the water. You don't turn a tap in Yakutia. You take a bucket and a chisel, and you go outside. The well had frozen solid 3 weeks ago. Now it was just ice she chipped from the surface, chunk by chunk. Inside, Vera prepared breakfast, the same breakfast as yesterday, and the day before that, and every day since October. They ate in silence. Not the silence of anger, the silence of 2 people who have already said everything worth saying. After breakfast, there was wood to bring in, always wood. The stove consumed it like the cold consumed everything else. Vera swept the cabin floor. She did this twice a day, whether it needed it or not. It was how she kept the world in order. Once a week they checked the supplies, counted the jars, measured the flour, calculated how many days were left. The flour would last until March. The firewood, maybe late February, if they were careful. They were always careful. In the afternoons, when the light thinned and the cold deepened, they sat together, and they remembered. Nadia remembered summers, when the meadow behind the cabin turned green, and the children ran barefoot through the grass. The children had grown, moved south, called once a year, sometimes twice, when the phone lines worked, which they hadn't since November. Vera never had children. She never spoke about it, and Nadia never asked. When the dark came, and it came by 3 in the afternoon, the cabin shrank to the size of the fire's reach. Vera read aloud sometimes. Old books with broken spines and pages soft as cloth. Stories they both knew by heart, but listened to anyway. Other nights they just sat, and the only sound was the fire and the wind and the old cabin settling its bones in the cold. The cold outside was not passive. It was a presence. It tested the walls. It searched for cracks. Some mornings, the inside of the cabin wall was white with frost, and Nadia would scrape it off with a kitchen knife before it melted into the wood. They kept animals once, chickens, a goat, but the winters kept getting worse, and the animals couldn't take it anymore. Neither could the veterinarian in Ust-Nera. Now it was just the two of them. Two heartbeats against the silence. Some days, that felt like enough. Other days, it didn't. Vera missed sound, not noise sound, a dog barking, a child laughing, anything that proved the world still existed beyond the snow. December passed like a held breath. January arrived with teeth. The temperature dropped again. -90, -92. The mercury in the old thermometer didn't move for 3 days. At these temperatures, exposed skin freezes in under 2 minutes. A deep breath can crystallize moisture in your lungs. They wore everything, 3 layers of wool, fur over that, and still, at night, they could feel the cold creeping through the floorboards. Sleep was the hardest. You can't feed a fire and sleep at the same time. One always suffers. Lest Nadia got up. She always got up, because sleep was a luxury, and survival was a job. She fed the fire, waited for it to catch, and when the warmth returned, she stood there an extra minute, just to feel it. By the time February arrived, the cold had reached its peak, -96. The number had stopped meaning anything. It was just the cold, their cold. And then, one Tuesday evening, with no warning, no logic, a sound came to their door that changed everything. We returned to the moment you already know. The cry, the door, the impossible thing lying in the snow. But now you understand. Now you know what this cabin means, what this cold costs, and what it takes to open a door when everything inside you says don't. The calf lay on the blanket between them. It hadn't moved. Its breathing was so shallow it seemed like a memory of breathing rather than the act itself. "We can't warm it too fast," Vera said. She remembered that much from the old days. Too much heat on frozen flesh can kill as surely as the cold. They moved the calf back from the stove, wrapped it in dry blankets instead, layer by layer, like swaddling a child. Nadia heated water, not hot, just warm, and soaked a cloth. She pressed it against the calf's chest, slowly, gently, like apologizing for the cold. An hour passed. Then 2. The ice in its fur melted. The cabin smelled of wet animal and wood smoke, and still the calf didn't open its eyes. "Maybe,"
I don't know if we can
Nadia
do
started.
This. I
But
don't know
Vera
if we
shook
can
her
do
head.
it. Yes, we can.
"Not yet. We don't say that yet." Vera remembered something from long ago, when the herders' wives would warm orphaned calves with their own bodies. She looked at Nadia. They laid down on the cabin floor, one on each side of the calf, and they pressed their bodies against it, giving it the only heat they had left to give. And sometime deep in the frozen night, with the wind howling its oldest song, the calf's breathing changed, deeper, steadier, like a small engine finding its rhythm. Nadia felt it first, a twitch against her arm, then a small, warm exhale against Vera's hand, and for the first time in hours, one of them smiled. Morning came, gray and reluctant, but inside the cabin, something had shifted. The calf was alive, unmistakably alive. Vera woke first, saw those eyes staring at her, and she laughed, a real laugh, the first one in months. The calf tried to lift its head. It managed an inch, then 2. Then it fell back down, but it tried, and that was everything. Now came the harder question. The calf was alive, but it needed to eat, and they had no reindeer milk. Nadia mixed warm water with powdered milk and a pinch of fat, stirred it with her finger, tasted it, made a face. "It'll have to do." Feeding it was another matter entirely. The calf didn't understand the cloth. The milk dribbled down its chin, but drop by drop, something got through. They fed it every 2 hours, through the day, through the night. Neither complained, neither suggested stopping. By the second day, the calf could hold its head up on its own. It watched them move around the cabin, with those enormous dark eyes tracking everything. Vera named it. She didn't ask permission. She just said it one morning like it had always been true. Misha, she said. His name is Misha. Misha. It means little bear in Russian, an odd name for a reindeer, but somehow it fit. The sisters fell into a new routine. The old one had been about surviving. This one was about keeping something else alive, but the cost was real. The powdered milk was running low. The extra firewood they burned to keep Misha warm that came from their own winter reserves. Vera suggested cutting their own portions. Nadia didn't argue. The porridge got thinner, the bread slices got smaller, but Misha's formula stayed the same. On the third day, Misha tried to stand. It was the most chaotic thing the cabin had seen in a decade. Nadia laid old sacking across the floor. Rough fabric, enough grip for small hooves, a reindeer runway right through the middle of their home. On the burlap, Misha stood, wobbling, shaking, his legs like 4 trembling sticks beneath him, but standing. He stood for 11 seconds, Vera counted. Then his back legs buckled and he sat down heavily. But 11 seconds was a lifetime. That night, the storm returned, harder than before. The cabin walls groaned under the weight of wind. Inside, the temperature dropped even with the stove at full burn. Frost formed on the wall behind the beds. The cold was finding new ways in. Misha shivered. Even near the stove, even under blankets, he shivered. And Nadia pressed herself against him again, because what else could she do? Vera stuffed every crack she could find. Old cloth, dried moss, even pages from a book she'd already read twice. The cold was patient. She had to be faster. The firewood was becoming a problem. They were burning through it faster than planned. Nadia counted the logs one morning and said nothing. The number was its own sentence. She would have to go outside, to the main woodpile, in -96. She dressed for it the way a soldier dresses for battle. The door opened. The cold hit her like a wall of glass. She pushed forward, 20 steps to the woodpile. 20 steps that could kill her. She loaded 4 logs into her arms. That's all she could carry. 4 logs. Maybe one day of warmth. She turned back toward the light in the door. She made 3 more trips that day. 12 logs total. It nearly broke her. But the stove would burn another 2 nights because of it. Misha watched all of this. And when Nadia sat down, he dragged himself across the burlap slowly, awkwardly, and pressed his head against her boot. Days passed, each one identical and irreplaceable. Misha grew stronger. The sisters grew thinner. The balance was shifting in ways they tried not to think about. On the 5th day, Misha walked. Not far. 3 steps on the burlap, but 3 steps that neither sister would ever forget. That evening, Nadia hummed, a song she hadn't sung since Dmitri was alive. She didn't notice she was doing it until Vera looked at her with tears in her eyes. A week in, Misha could cross the entire cabin. 12 wobbly steps on the burlap path. He followed Vera like a shadow. Where she went, he went. Nadia teased her sister. He thinks you're his mother, she said. Vera didn't argue. Maybe she didn't want to, but the storm wouldn't quit. 8 days straight now, and the woodpile outside was becoming buried. Soon it would be unreachable. Inside, Nadia counted the remaining indoor firewood again. 16 logs. At the current rate, 4 days. Maybe 5 if they let the fire die down at night. Vera had an idea. They could break apart the empty animal pen outside. It was old wood dry, ready to burn. But getting to it meant going out there again. This time they went together, because alone, in that cold, was too dangerous. If one fell, the other could pull her back. The pen was 30 steps from the door. In the blizzard, it felt like 30 miles. Nadia swung the axe. The frozen wood shattered rather than split. They filled 2 sacks. It wasn't much, but it would buy them 3 more days, maybe 4. Inside again, the door sealed. Misha bumped his head against Vera's leg before she'd even taken her coat off. She didn't mind the cold nose. 10 days since they found him. Misha could walk the full length of the cabin. His legs still wobbled on the last few steps, but his eyes were bright. He discovered the stove on his own, walked right up to it, stood there, basking in the heat like he'd invented it. But with recovery came a new problem. Misha was growing, and growing animals are hungry animals. The formula wasn't enough anymore. Nadia began mixing dried lichen and softened grain into the formula. Something she'd seen herders do long ago. She wasn't sure it would work, but her hands remembered the motion even when her mind didn't. Misha ate it, hesitant at first, then with enthusiasm. Lichen and grain, the food of his kind for 10,000 years. 2 weeks. The storm finally broke. Not fully, but enough. The wind eased. The sky showed patches of pale blue, like bruises healing. Nadia opened the door that morning and didn't flinch. The cold was still brutal, but the wind was gone. And without the wind, she could hear the silence. Real silence. The kind that meant the world was still there. Misha heard the door open and came to investigate. He'd never seen the outside world. He stood behind Nadia and stretched his neck past her hip to look. He tried to step outside, one hoof on the snow, and he pulled it back immediately. The cold was a shock his body wasn't ready for. Nadia closed the door. "Not yet, little one," she said, "but soon, when you're ready, when the world is ready for you." But the world outside was changing. The light lasted a few minutes longer each day, and somewhere deep beneath the snow, something ancient was beginning to remember what warmth was. It happened on a Thursday, the 16th day, the day everything almost ended. Inside, the morning had started like any other. Tea, porridge, Misha walking his burlap path, Vera humming the song Nadia had brought back to life. Then Misha coughed, a small sound, barely anything. But in this cabin, in this silence, every sound meant something. By midday, the cough had deepened. Misha lay in his blankets, breathing faster than he should. His nose, which had been clearing for days, was wet and running again. Vera knelt beside him and placed her hand on his side. His body was burning. In a cabin surrounded by the coldest air on earth, this small creature had a fever. They had nothing, no medicine, no veterinarian within 100 kilometers, no phone that worked, just their hands, their knowledge, and whatever the cabin held. Nadia brewed chamomile tea strong for the fever. Vera soaked cloths in cool water, well, cool by cabin standards, and laid them across Misha's body. They worked without speaking, like a surgical team that communicates in glances. Getting the tea into him was a battle. He didn't want it, but they were patient, and patience out here was the only medicine that never ran out. Night fell. The fever didn't break. Outside, the new storm arrived, slamming into the cabin like a fist. The worst timing imaginable. Inside, the walls shook. The stove draft roared and stuttered as the wind fought the chimney. Misha trembled from fever and from fear. Vera held him and whispered the only words she had left. At midnight, the worst happened. Misha's breathing changed. It became shallow, irregular, gasping. Then it stopped. Vera screamed his name. Not loud, not dramatic, just his name. Once, like calling someone home for dinner. Nadia moved. Not with thought, with something older than thought. She was at the calf's side in an instant, hands on his chest, pressing, rhythmic, determined, the way she'd seen a doctor do once, 30 years ago, to a man who'd fallen through ice. 5 compressions, nothing. 10, nothing. Her arms burned. Her knuckles ached against the small rib cage. She didn't stop. Vera leaned down. She didn't know what she was doing, but she covered the calf's nostrils with her mouth and breathed. One slow, warm breath into its lungs. They worked in tandem. Nadia pressed. Vera breathed. Press, breathe, press, breathe. Like two halves of the same heart. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Nadia's arms shook. Her shoulders screamed. But she thought of Dmitri, of finding him cold on the roof, of being too late then. Not this time. 3 minutes. Vera's lungs burned from the effort of breathing for 2. She tasted chamomile on Misha's breath, the tea she'd fought so hard to give him, still there, still in him. And then a twitch beneath Nadia's hands, a flutter in the tiny rib cage, not a heartbeat yet, but the memory of one. Again, Nadia whispered, and Vera breathed into him again, and the flutter became a beat, and the beat found a rhythm. Misha breathed, on his own, his lungs filled and emptied without their help, the smallest, most enormous thing in the world. Outside, the storm raged on. It didn't care. It never did. But inside, something had won. They didn't sleep that night. They sat on either side of Misha, holding warm cloths against his body, feeding him chamomile drop by drop, watching every breath like a prayer being answered over and over. Dawn came. The storm weakened, and Misha opened his eyes. Vera wept. Not silently this time. She wept the way a woman weeps when she's been holding it in for 9 years. Nadia put her arm around her sister, said nothing. Sometimes that's the only thing left to say. By afternoon, Misha drank on his own. By evening, he stood, shaky, defiant, as if death had merely been a suggestion he'd considered and declined. The fever broke fully by the next morning. Whatever Nadia's chamomile and Vera's breathing had done, it was enough. It was always going to be enough. 3 weeks since they found him. Outside, something remarkable was happening. The cold was letting go, slowly, reluctantly, like a fist unclenching. And with the warming came something neither sister had expected. Sounds from the distance. Bells. Movement. Life returning to the tundra. Vera saw them first, through the cleared circle on the frosted window. She didn't say what she was thinking, but Nadia heard it anyway. Misha heard it too. The bells. His ears rotated toward the window. His nostrils flared. Something ancient stirred in him, a frequency older than memory. That night, for the first time, Misha didn't sleep near the stove. He slept by the door, facing outward, toward the sound. Vera didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed and watched him sleep by the door, and she understood what mothers have understood since the beginning of time, that the whole point of love is to make the loved one strong enough to leave. The next days were filled with a quiet urgency. They needed to prepare him. He couldn't survive the tundra on cabin food. He needed to learn the snow. His first full step outside, then another. His hooves sank into the snow and found the ground beneath. Something in his body remembered this. The cold air filled his lungs, and instead of flinching, he breathed deeper. He walked 10 steps from the door, then 20. Then he stopped and looked back at the cabin at Vera standing in the doorway, and for a moment, the whole world held still. He came back,
All right, Misha.
not because he was afraid, because he wasn't ready yet, and he knew it, and she knew it, and there was no rush. The herd drew closer over the next 3 days. One morning, Nadia could count individual animals, 40, maybe 50. Cows and calves and bulls moving northeast towards spring grazing. Misha stood at the window, watching. His whole body trembled, not from cold, not from fear, from recognition, from the pull of something he couldn't name, but couldn't resist. They chose a morning, not too cold, not too warm, a morning that felt like permission. Nadia woke Vera gently. "Today," she said. Just the one word. Vera nodded. She'd known for days. They fed him one last time. Inside, the lichen and grain mixture he loved. Vera made sure it was perfect. Extra lichen, a little warmer than usual, as if this last meal could say everything her mouth couldn't. Vera knelt beside him while he ate. She smoothed the fur between his ears, touched the small bumps where his antlers would grow, whispered something only he could hear. Nadia opened the door. The morning air rushed in, cold, clean, alive, and for once it didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like an invitation. Misha looked up from his empty bowl, saw the open door, saw the sunlight, smelled the tundra, and something shifted behind his eyes, something final. He walked to the door, paused, looked back at Vera, then at Nadia, then at the stove, the warm heart that had kept him alive. And then he stepped outside, into the sunlight, into the cold, into the world he was born to walk. Vera stepped into the doorway. She didn't follow, she just watched, and her face held everything, every feeding, every night on the floor, every breath she put into his lungs. Nadia stood behind her, placed her hand on Vera's shoulder. They watched together, the way they'd done everything this winter, together. Misha walked, steady now, each step taking him further from the door, further from them. The snow crunched softly under his hooves, the only sound in the world. Halfway to the herd, he stopped, turned once more. The cabin was small behind him now. Two figures in the doorway. He could still see them. They could still see him. A cow in the herd lifted her head, looked toward Misha. Her nostrils tested the air. She took a step forward, then another, coming to meet him. They met in the snow, noses touching. The cow breathed across Misha's face, warm, grassy, familiar in a way he'd never experienced but somehow knew. The cow turned and walked back toward the herd, slowly, and Misha followed her. Not because he was told, because his legs knew the way even when his heart didn't. From the doorway, Vera watched until she couldn't tell which one was his anymore, until he was just part of the herd, part of the world, where he was always meant to be. Nadia closed the door, gently, not with finality, but with the tenderness of closing a chapter in a book you love. The cabin was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after something important has happened, not empty, full of what had been. Vera picked up his blanket, held it to her face. It still smelled like him, warm fur and lichen and life. Nadia made tea, 'cause that's what you do. After everything, after the storms and the cold and the miracle, you make tea. They sat together, the same table, the same tea, the same silence.
We did
but
it,
the
Nadia.
silence was different now.
Yes, we
It
did.
was full. That afternoon, Vera opened the cabin door and left it open. Just for a few minutes. Just to hear the world. Nadia joined her. They stood side by side in the doorway, looking out at the white world. And for the first time in months, it didn't look like a prison. It looked like a canvas. Days passed. The temperature climbed. -60, -50. Icicles began to drip. The cabin's breath was changing. One morning behind the cabin, Vera found a single green shoot pushing through the snow. She called Nadia as if she had found gold. The herd had moved northeast toward summer pasture. Somewhere out there, he was growing stronger, becoming what he was meant to be. Vera washed his blanket, dried it by the stove, folded it carefully, and placed it on her bed where she could feel it at night. Spring came slowly in Yakutia, not as a season, but as a rumor that gradually became true. One Tuesday, a sound Vera had nearly forgotten reached the cabin. An engine, distant, growing closer. The supply road had reopened. The driver was a young man from Usnera. He brought flour, salt, medicine, and letters from the children. He asked if they were all right. Nadia smiled. "We are now," she said. That night, with fresh bread and full stomachs, they sat by the stove, and Vera told the story, from the first cry in the snow to the last look back. Weeks passed.
Still
The meadow
nothing
behind
today,
the cabin
but
turned green,
I'll keep
and
looking,
every
little
morning,
ones.
Vera
Keep
opened the
looking.
door and looked northeast, just in case. One July morning, warm, impossibly warm, she opened the door, and at the edge of the meadow, a shape. She didn't call his name. She didn't need to. He was already walking toward her. He stopped 3 feet from the door. She looked at him. He looked at her. And everything that needed to be said had already been said months ago, in a language neither of them spoke. She reached out and touched the spot between his ears, the same place as before. He leaned into her hand, and she laughed the same laugh from the morning he first opened his eyes. He didn't stay. He wasn't meant to. After an hour, he turned back toward the trees, but he looked back. Vera turned to Nadia. "He'll come back," she said. Nadia nodded. "They always do," she said. "When they're loved right, they always come back." That winter, the next one was just as cold, just as dark, just as long, but it was not the same, because now the cabin held something the cold could never touch, a memory, a purpose, a reason to keep the fire burning. 2 widows lived alone at -96 degrees in Yakutia, and one winter, a cry came from the snow, and they answered it, and that made all the difference.